Okay. Om Gyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshur Unmiltam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Siddhanta Palasara Nityarasikam Hamsam Vilasakam Auraryaka Sudhama Sevagadhanam Mishamba Bhakti Pradam Yachna Yukti Vichakshana Togabido Vaishishta Shaktya Sara Vandeham Tripurari Namakayatim Sri Bhakti Vedantina Vande Sri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sahorido Gauradaye Pushpavanto Chitro Sando Tamonudo Vandeham Sri Ram Krishna Abhaya Charana Sakho Sukado Paramanando Sundaro Subala Priyo Aho Bhagyam Nanda Gopa Brajokasham Yan Mitram Paramanandam Purna Brahma Sanatanam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopikakanta Radhaganta Namustate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prisabhanu Sudadevi Hari Pranamami Hari Priye Sagurudev Ki Jai Shri Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Now let's see. Welcome Bimalangi Didi, Braj Haridas, and Braj Bhakti. Thank you for being here. And let's see. Let me make sure everything's running well. Yeah. Okay. So I don't remember how many of you were here with me for the first class. I know, well, at least a few of you were there. And after the class, I started thinking, like, how could I have made it better or somehow more engaging? And I started feeling like I should really like try to involve you guys more and have it be kind of like more of a exploration together than me just talking and you getting bored with this guy just going off on whatever he's going off on. So I'm not gonna mute you guys this time. I'm just gonna have you can unmute yourself whenever you want. And I would really like to have you be part of this whole thing. And so with that in mind, I would like to start with, let me just see my notes here, with basically recapping the first class together. So what I'd like you guys to do is whatever points like were salient to you or like points that resonated with you, whatever you remember from the class, let's kind of like go through it together. And I'd love to hear from you, especially if there's anything in the class that you're able to think about during the week or like use in your life or whatever. So any volunteers? Let's see what you remember. Martin's lifting his hand.
Haribol Gurunistha.
Haribol, Jai.
Haribol. I got a question according to one thing you said the previous class. If I remember, you said something that the environment, like we shouldn't excuse our not development according to the environment. Like we shouldn't put our, I can find the word in English, like it's not the fault of our environment that we are not progressing, basically, right?
Oh,
and
not
then,
like, yeah.
You understand the point, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And in the same day, I attend a class with Vaishnava Maharaj, and he said he quotes Sri Maharaj, saying that a quote that was kind of, we are a product of our close environment. So I was thinking like must be like kind of a balance in between those two quotes, right? Like in those two statements. Yeah. So I was thinking the whole week about that.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I guess, I mean, in some ways you could say we're always a product of our environment in a way that we're extremely like affected by it. And one point I made last week was that we do have like free will to decide what environment we want to be in. So then what Siddhartha Maharaj was saying there is basically like either you choose to be in the environment of the material influence or you choose to be in the environment of the Swarup Shakti. But like we can't really like be anything without our environment. Like the soul, I mean, it has qualities, but the qualities of the soul can't really like play out without an environment. And that's why, like, if you're not in an environment, then that's like Brahman realization, which is basically, from our point of view, it's like nothing almost. Yeah, that's what I would say. I mean, I would have to actually go back into like the Paramatma Sandarbha and see if that's totally accurate, what I just said about the Brahman realization. But that's my understanding, that because it's, I mean, it is a sort of one kind of an environment, but really it's not, it doesn't define us in any way. So I think that's how I take it. Like, I definitely was not trying to say that we can be whatever we want to be without any kind of environment, that, you know, that doesn't really like mean anything in a way. So yeah, does that make sense? Or
Yeah, totally. Thank you.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other volunteers? Let's try to recap some of the other points I made last week.
So I remember this, you were talking about the will, and how we have to enter into this thing, the space in between input and response, or what is the word?
Response, yeah.
So that's, and I feel like you were talking about that for a long time, but I'm not sure what more details there were about that.
Yeah, that, I feel like that was kind of like the gist of the class, that there is like something that we can do, like the free will that is in that space between the stimulus and the response. Yeah, very good, very good. Anything else?
I just like remember a thought I had, like when I hear about will, you know, to kind of seize that kind of power that we have, the willpower. I find it more, I don't know if it's just a language thing, but I find it more easy to relate to when it's called like the sense of agency. Because like then there's not this like problem of trying to like figure out if there is free will or not, but we at least we definitely feel like we have free will, and then like from that feeling we can develop further.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that is a nice term. If free will somehow sounds kind of like being this like second-hand God or something, I guess. Free will, like I will or whatever, but then agency is like everybody acknowledges that we like act in the world, or we are like active beings. So yeah, that's a very nice point. Much appreciated. Anybody else? Well, if nobody else has anything to say, I think that is a pretty good recap. I think one thing I would re-emphasize is that we have free will, but like in the state that we are in right now, it's very much contracted. The whole process of like becoming more intentional as sadhakas is to like try to build up on the little free will that we have, or like trying to like kind of like bring us out from underneath the material conditioning, how in our environment like basically makes us act as if we didn't have free will. And the more we are under the modes, the more we will act like we don't have free will. So yeah, I guess that's kind of like the whole thing in a nutshell. And then there was one concept about this, still a little bit more about what I was talking about in the first class, that like really makes people, or makes us understand better what this whole concept of like proactivity and reactivity is. And it's this idea of the circle of influence and circle of concern. And to kind of like illustrate this point better, I want to use this awesome feature here called the whiteboard. Let's see. Share screen. How does this thing work? Okay, here we go. Whiteboard. All right. Are you guys seeing a whiteboard and a pen?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So let's see here. I'll take a fat pen like that. Okay, so here's a dot. And I'm explaining this because some viewers might just listen to this in the future as a podcast. So anyway, I'm explaining everything that I'm doing. So I'm drawing a dot in the center, and that is you right there. You're the dot. And then around us, around the dot, there's this circle of influence that we can actually influence of our environment. We have some kind of influence, like whatever it can be, like based on our decisions and choices and behaviors, we can have some kind of influence in our environment. But since we're not God, since we're not like omnipotent, omniscient, you can't influence your whole environment. So we have that smaller circle around us. That's basically the sphere of our influence. And then there's a bigger circle around that circle of influence that could be called the circle of concern, which means that we're aware of that environment, but we can't have any effect over it. And so if you think about, say, like your circle of influence could be, of course, your decisions, your body, and then also like your friends, your family, stuff like that. You have some influence over that. The bigger influence is this influence circle of of concern, which basically means the rest of the world, like whether there's going to be a nuclear war or whether Trump's going to be reelected or whatever it is, like stuff that we can be concerned about, but we have no power over what's going to happen in our like greater circumstance. And the difference between proactive people who try to be intentional about their lives and people who are reactive and who just kind of live like sort of like animals in a way that they just react to the stimulus that comes their way. They react in these knee-jerk kind of like instinctual ways. The difference is that the proactive people try to live in this inner circle of the circle of influence. They put their whole focus on this circle of influence, and especially in the dot right in the center. And so the idea is that you really focus on, kind of like Gandhi, I mean, that is like kind of like the proactive mantra, what he said, like be the change that you want to see in the world. That is like proactivity in a nutshell. Whereas then the reactive people, they live in the circle of concern, like they obsess over politics, for example. And I have to admit, I fell into this trap last year when there was that whole Trump election. I normally don't want to like bother too much, but somehow it was so intense and I got sucked into it. And it was very disturbing. Like I could not pop out of this, like they call it doom scrolling. Like you just get overwhelmed by like all the bad news and you doom scroll. And it's really, really a bad space to be in. And the interesting thing is the more you get into the circle of concern, it starts diminishing your circle of influence because you focus in the wrong place, and then your actual influence starts getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And it's so like ironic when you think about it, because the whole point of focusing on the circle of concern is this idea that you can influence your greater circle of like your environment, but actually it ends up even like diminishing your actual effectiveness and your actual like level of influence. And Krishangi said something really interesting in her talk, was it this Tuesday? She said that if we put it in these terms, basically what she was saying, she got into politics because she wanted to affect this circle of concern, the larger circle. But what she then found out is that after years and years of being in the city council and spending so much time and energy into trying to change things, she realized that really she would have made a bigger change even in the world if she would have just focused on being a really good sadhaka and being really serious about spiritual life. I hope I'm not like misrepresenting her, but that's what I took from it. So basically, if she would have focused on her circle of influence and the dot in the center, she could have more affected her circle of concern than being into politics for many years. And that was really powerful to me. And I'll give you one more example of this circle of influence and circle of concern. Well, one thing I want to say is if you think about your own life and where you're focused, and you can really kind of like gauge how proactive you are based on where your focus is. And I've found this extremely useful. It's like kind of like conceptual orientation of these two different areas in terms of trying to understand that I'm not getting sucked into the reactionary, reactive space. And so what happened the other day was I was digging these holes on Guru Maharaj's hill. My Guru Maharaj's hill, I was planting these grasses in front of his house. If you've been to Audarya, basically, my Guru Maharaj's house is at the top, and then there's this hill that goes down to this flat area where the temple is. And so I was planting things on the hill by his house, and the soil is extremely hard in Audarya. It's like straight clay, and it was a heat wave. It must have been like 36, 37 degrees Celsius. It was around like close to 90 Fahrenheit. It was over 90 Fahrenheit. And it was a tough situation. The soil was hard. The work was really hard. So I was using this big black bar. And so I was sweating, and I was doing it for hours, and it was starting to get a little tough for the mind, you know. And so there are these really annoying little flies in Audarya. They're like tiny little flies, and they fly straight into your nostrils, and they fly straight into your ears and straight into your eyes. They're like the most annoying little things you can imagine. And it's always like straight in the things that annoy you the most. And so there I was like sweating and like beating with this huge metal bar for hours. And these guys start flying in my eyes and ears and nostrils. And I started getting really agitated, like, man, this is just too much. You know, these guys, it was specifically those flies. I just wanted to like burn them with my vision, like Shiva, you know, when Kamadev tried to annoy him or something. And then I was able to catch myself by using this idea of the circle of influence and the circle of concern. And so what I realized is really the best thing to do, and this really relates to service, I think, very well, because you can think about if your mind gets agitated, a lot of times it blocks you from doing service well, or like being focused on service, you get focused on the externals or whatever is agitating your mind. So I caught myself in that situation because I started thinking about this circle of concern and circle of influence. Oh, and the funny thing was, when that happened, I was thinking about what to say in the next class, and I had all these like fancy ideas, and then I was completely agitated myself by these little gnats, you know. And so I realized what I was doing was the flies were in the circle of concern. There was nothing I could do about the flies. Well, the only thing I could do was to swat them away with my hand. And so, but the fact that I was getting so annoyed with them, that was purely in the circle of concern, because I can't, even if I swat them with my hands, they will come back. And so then I adjusted my thinking. I was like, well, they will come back and that's okay. So I'll only do what's in my actual circle of influence, which is to swat them away, but without any agitation. It's just, I'll take it just as like breathing, you know, like breathing is something you have to do constantly. And it could be annoying if you thought that you could do something about it, but you can't. So then you just breathe and you don't think about it. It's just part of the environment. So I started thinking about the flies as just being part of the environment. And then amazingly, I wasn't bothered by them at all. I only did what I could do, which was swat them without any agitation. And then they would go away for a little longer. And two things happened. The first thing that happened was I realized the gnats weren't coming as much as I thought they were, those flies, because I wasn't agitated by it. Like agitation adds to this feeling of there being like much more of some negative thing than there is. And the second thing that really hit me was that because I was so agitated by the flies, my circle of influence, which was the quality of my service, started diminishing because I was too focused on the flies. And when I realized that I'd given these flies this amazing amount of power to like diminish first of all my circle of influence and affect the quality of my service on that level, it was just like immediately, like when that like kind of sambandha, or that like what the conceptual understanding of what's going on, when that became clear to me, then I was immediately able to be just like, this is ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. So anyway, that was my experience from last week, from what I was talking about in the class. And the flies can be very annoying, but it's all in the circle of concern. And from that idea, we can, what I want to go to from there is, since I want to include you guys more in this whole process and try to make it a more reciprocal thing, I made a little poll, and let's see, I want to do another share here. Let's go share. So are you guys seeing this little poll here?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So this is not something, I'm not expecting you to answer this like publicly, but just think about this in your life. The thing is, like, we're thinking about our circle of influence right now. Let's like focus on the fact, like, where are we at? How do we feel about our situation in the world and our situation in life in general? And so just think about, pick one of these numbers based on what you feel where you're at, and then just remember what that number is. Just give it a minute or something to think about. And then another poll, let's see here. This one didn't work out so well after all. Oh, wait. Sorry, some technical difficulties here. Are you guys seeing another thing, or is it still the same? Oh, okay, that's weird. It's giving me a different one. Okay, so just think about that as well, and remember the number. And then just think about it to yourself, like how different, if the number is the same in these both things or not. And the interesting thing to there to think about is, if your sadhaka personality and your material personality are kind of like off kilter, because if you get different numbers, there has to be some kind of like incongruency between the two. But just let's start, keep that in mind as we go through this whole thing. Just think about really what I want to do with this class is to like focus on like who do you want to be? Basically try to like mine the deepest, like most fundamental values that we hold right now, and just become more aware of what we actually want from life, and who do you really want to be, and then where are we at right now, and then what we want to be, because we all we have this idea of, okay, we're devotees, so we're supposed to want this and this and this. But then at the same time, because we are sadhakas are, lower level sadhakas are a mixed bag by definition, we're a mixture of that material influence and the spiritual influence, then what I really want to try to do with some of these exercises and thought experiments is to get in touch with where we actually are at in terms of what our deep values are, and then how to go from, if they are totally, or not even totally, but somewhat different from what the devotional goal is, how do we sort of bridge that gap between the two different, almost like two different identities? And to really get in touch with what we actually want and what our deepest values, and oops, hold on just a second. Sorry about that. I'm here at my mother-in-law's in Silicon Valley. They're building new houses all the time. So that's what's going on in the neighborhood. So let's see, what was I saying? Oh yeah, so a really, really good way of getting in touch with like what our actual values are and what we want out of life is to think about death and think about like the finality of like, if you knew you were dying, how would you change your life? Like, how would you actually live differently? Because it forces us to like, when you know that something's about to end, like, you know that your life's about to end, it forces you to like do away with all the extra stuff that that is on top of your actual values. Because like all the everyday issues of like taking care of your body and like getting along with your work, colleagues, or like we have these massive amount of like these kind of like provisional worries and things we have to be worried about in our lives. All that, when you think about death, all that's going to be removed. So I'd like to do this excuse me, this quick thought experiment of like being in the situation that you actually come face to face with the fact that you're going to die. So if you could imagine just for a moment being in a, say, like a doctor's office, and try to be like visceral, like try to think about your, like visualize the whole thing through your senses. So you're sitting on this examination table and you can feel the fake leather under your butt and under your arms, under your like palms. And there's that awful smell that's in the hospitals, that like sterile rubbing alcohol and some kind of anti germ, whatever that stuff is, that kind of that like sterile smell. You smell that smell and you're waiting for the doctor to come in the room. And so the doctor comes and she tells you that they were supposed to take just some normal like blood samples, basic like checkup, health checkup. And they found out that you have some kind of rare blood disease that will deteriorate your health in 1 year. And in 1 year, you're gonna you won't like slowly deteriorate, in that you'll have your full energy for a year, and then all of a sudden you'll basically collapse and die. And there's nothing they can do about it. You only have 1 year to live. And so like, if you really place yourself in that situation right now, exactly this day, from this moment on, you have 1 year to live. What would you do differently? Like, think about it in terms of your roles, for example, in life. Like, you might be a mother or a father, a teacher, and especially think about it in relation to like being a devotee, being the disciple of a guru, if you are a disciple of a guru, or you have people that you inspire or have inspired spiritually. Just think about your life as a whole in terms of all the different roles, and like, what would you do if you knew you had just 1 year left? Now, I'm going to give you just a minute or two to think about that and try to, this might sound or seem kind of hokey. I almost feel like weird talking about this stuff because it's so like new agey or something in a way. But the reason I'm doing this against my my own, sense, is that I know from experience that these kind of thought experiments are extremely useful in getting in touch with the kind of like the deeper values that are a lot of times kind of under the surface during your everyday life. So just give it a couple of minutes and think about how you would live your last year if you knew that you would definitely be dead in a year. Maybe if you have a pen and paper, you could even write something down. I'll just give you a minute to think about it. Okay, hopefully that was enough time for you. So then, whatever you wrote down, then the question is like, why are we not doing that already. Like, why is it that if we knew we had 1 year, we would do these things? But like, why is it that we're not doing it right now? It's not like we're going to live forever. And the interesting thing is, Krishna actually says in the Mahabharata, there's a section where he says that he's being questioned by this demon about different things. And one of the questions is that, what is the most amazing thing in the world? And Krishna says, the most amazing thing in the world is that everything is dying around us at all times. There's death like everywhere. Yet still we think that we're immortal. Like, we have this sense, and I know this from my own experience, and I think everybody can relate to this, that we have the sense that we're not going to die, that everybody else is going to die, but it's not going to happen to me. No problem. And to me, it's a clear indication that our souls are eternal, because why would we otherwise ever think like that? Everything around us says that we're going to die. It's like this megaphone, like screaming in our ears, dude, you're going to die. It's like, no, not me. And so like, then the question is, we can like infer, we can like see our environment, and we can know for sure we're going to die in this body, and this, like, whatever we have going here is going to die. So why is it that we're not changing our lives according to how we actually would want to live if we knew that we're going to die in a year? And in this connection, there was this like huge hit book that came out a few years ago by this Australian nurse who nursed, excuse me, let me just grab a little water here, who nursed people who had just like a couple of weeks to live. She was a nurse to people like that for years. And so she started this blog about the regrets that those people had. And so then it became so popular, that blog, that she ended up writing a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And I just want to do another screen share, because I'm so into this screen sharing now, to show you what those five top regrets were. Here's number 1. Let's see. So number 1 is, I'm reading this out for the ones who are not seeing the screen. I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. So this can be like really relevant in terms of devotees, because since we're like people in the world and we're devotees at the same time, it's very easy to fall into this trap of thinking that, well, I'm not going to be super out about my devotional life, because what are people going to think about that? Or whatever it is, like always this, like basically just living according to, other people's expectations. And this relates to what I was talking about earlier about the power to choose, is that if you always live to other people according to other people's expectations, you're like basing your life on, in a lot of ways, kind of like the circle of concern. Like, you're not really going deep in and thinking about what your values are, and like what is the most beneficial thing for me personally. It's always about like, how is the environment thinking about me? How is the immediate environment like reflecting me back to myself, instead of like getting in touch with who you actually are and who you want to be in terms of devotion. So that's pretty interesting. Even in the world, it's like people, when they start dying, all these like exterior concerns kind of like fly away, and then they're like, oh, like, why was I not more true to myself? So that was number 1. And let's see, number 2 is, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. So this is really interesting too. Like, there's so many false values that we have in terms of like who we want to be in the world. And working really is a means to try to actualize these false values of like who we want to be. And this is, I've heard extremely common. And it makes sense, because, you know, when you think about like status, for example, what is your status gonna matter when you're dying? You know, nobody's gonna care who you were when you're like completely infirm and lying in bed and waiting to die. So it's funny, because they seem so obvious, these points, but once you're in the like influenced by the material environment, you get covered over, like our intelligence gets covered over by like what actually is important. And that's what anartha means. Anartha means like false value, anartha. And that's, we get covered by these false values in that way. And in this connection, Madhavananda Prabhu, who's a disciple of Sripad Gaur Govinda Maharaj, he likes comics, and he posted this one meme that I just have to share with you guys. It was so funny. Let's see here. Okay. He posted it a few months ago, and I thought it was so hilarious. This cannot go without sharing. Where is it? I guess you guys are seeing it because you're laughing. That's good. So this sharing thing is like so confusing. I don't know. I don't see it. So anyway, for those who don't see the video, there's this old guy. The meme has this old guy in a hospital bed, and he's thinking, I wish I spent more time arguing online. And that's another one of these things, like that's a perfect example of what the circle of concern is. Like, think about arguing online. You're actually spending like your precious minutes and hours, a lot of times it's days and weeks for a lot of people, arguing online over something completely useless a lot of times that you will never be able to change. Like, the only thing you can actually change by arguing online is your own mood, which is going to go south really fast. So that's the only thing you can actually change by arguing. But anyway, let's get back to the 5 biggest regrets of dying people. So number 3, sorry. Number 3 is, I wish I hadn't worked. No, sorry. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. And that's, yeah, there's not much comment about that. It's pretty straightforward. And then number 4, I just wanted to add that these, when you see the explanations underneath these ones, these are by the author. So she's explaining basically what her experience of these results were. Number 4 is, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. And of course, I was trying to think of all these regrets in terms of devotees and how it might play out in a devotee's life. And this to me could be easily interpreted as like, I wish I had stayed more in touch with the Sangha and with my guru, and like the right environment, like the right kind of like social network. And I think I've heard that a lot of devotees who have fallen off the wagon, sort of, that this is one of their big regrets, that they couldn't stay connected to the devotees. They went away. And let's see, the last one, which to me was one of the most interesting ones, is oh shoot, I'm missing. So number 5 is, I wish that I had let myself be happier. And one thing that this author here says especially was really interesting to me, and it says, many of these old people did not realize until the end that happiness is a choice. They had stayed stuck in old patterns and habits. The so-called comfort of familiarity overflowed into their emotions as well as their physical lives. So this is like a fantastic idea, really nicely like plays into what we've been talking about the freedom to choose, basically. And you don't think of a happiness as a choice, but if you understand the right principles behind like the principles that are worth following, then it really is your choice to be happy, because if you choose to align yourself with those values or those like principles of like Krishna consciousness or bhakti, that will make you happy if you do it in a way that's like sustainable for you. And if you just, I don't know, to me it was like significant that somebody who is not a devotee, I don't know if she's spiritual, but the fact that she realized that she made that point, that it is your choice to be happy, it's really fantastic to me, really interesting to me. So yeah, those are the 5 biggest regrets. And I guess if then we start thinking about like, how can we apply these ideas to our own lives? And to me, the obvious kind of, let me get back to, let's see, are you seeing my face again, Sham? Okay, good. So then the obvious thing, like we hear like these people, hundreds of people who like say what they're regretting when they're about to die. It's such a great like opportunity for us to actually take advantage of the kind of advice that we can't first live and then do it ourselves, in a way that we can't be just about to die and then learn from that and then come back to, living those ideas. I mean, we will in the next life, but we'll be mostly covered by the next embodiment. So it's not the same thing. And so then it would really make sense right now to like take advantage of this wisdom that these dying people have given us and put that in the devotional context. And so then when you start thinking about how to basically, like, first of all, in the first class, we came to the conclusion that we can choose our own response to our environment as much as our free will allows us. I mean, so obviously it's not this complete freedom because we are tied in many ways, but there is actual freedom in terms of our agency, as Shamananda would put it. So like then, so okay, we have this agency. So then how are we gonna kind of like design our lives in a way that is in line with the principles of bhakti and also what's truly in our own interest? And that, I would say, like the best thing to start constructing our lives based on this wisdom and these realizations is to start with the idea, with the end in mind, basically. So you start kind of like envisioning what you want your life to be and who you want to be based on what you would want to be, what you would have wanted to be when you're dying. So you start with the end in mind. And I don't know, for me, this has been a really powerful meditation. And it kind of does away with all the loose things in between, like you and your actual true values. And this idea about the beginning with the end in mind, one really important thing that is connected to it is this idea that there's always two creations. There's always the mental creation, whatever you do, or the mental like visualizing or envisioning of what you want to do, and then the actual act of doing that thing. Say like in terms of anything you do, say like if you want to build a house, you have to start it with the blueprints. Like you rack your brain, you think of every possible situation of or every possible factor of what you want to consider when you build the final building or the house. And so you start with that mental creation of what you want, and then you run the thoughts by somebody else, for example, an architect, or you bounce ideas off with your friends. And of course, in this context, it would be the guru, that you have an idea of how you want to live your devotional life. And then you consult your god siblings, you consult your guru, and you read the scriptures and try to get this good idea of what specifically for you, for your psychology and the kind of like the packaging that you have as a sadhaka, what would be the most fulfilling devotional life for you in this body, basically. And so you get clear, first of all, you get clear on what it is that you want, and you get clear on your specific psychology and personhood as a sadhaka, and then you start basically building your life around those realizations, or that like understanding of what you like and what you actually want as a devotee. And this is what, when I call this whole series the intentional sadhaka, this is like kind of like the core of the intentionality or the intentional sadhaka idea, is that you don't just like randomly bounce around and try to do sadhana in the meantime when you like being, smacked around by the material environment. But you stop and you take charge of the fact that you can actually decide. And then you use your mental capacity, like you use your imagination and the kind of like conscience, or your like paramatma sort of, and your guru's input and your god siblings or whoever you trust in this way. And you like try to kind of like get a very clear idea of what you actually want. And then the third class is going to be talking about how you actually go about that. And there's many things I could talk about how to get clear on what you really want and who you are and what you want to be, who you want to be. Like, for example, you can write it out as sort of kind of like a personal declaration of independence or constitution or something, like this is what I want in relation to different roles that I have in this life, and just keep it as a written statement so that you can refer to it whenever you start, like you feel like you're starting to veer off or something like that. Or like you can just meditate on the fact that we're impermanent in this body and consciousness, or this like mind. And I mean, there's many ways that different books talk about how to do this, or you might come up with your own ways, but I don't really have time to go into all these different things. But if you feel like this would be a useful exercise for you to get clarity on what you actually want and then start working towards that as a devotee, then I would highly recommend reading certain books like The 7 Habits or many other similar books. I mean, it's good to know that the books are well grounded in the right principles, but I would suggest The 7 Habits. That's by far the best book I've found. And just like put the work in to kind of make your blueprint of what you want to be. And one thing I still want to say is, as devotees, I'm going to finish with this, but as devotees, because we are a mixed bag in the lower levels of sadhana, we can easily have these like anarthas that we think is the true self or who we really want to be and stuff. And to get clarity on on our like false sense that feels like the real sense is extremely helpful to think about the different kind of like alternative centers that we might have. Like, for example, you can be family centered, but you don't even realize it. Like, you actually, the highest value that you have in your life is your family, or work, or status. Status is a big one. Or even like you can have this sangha centeredness that is actually unhealthy. Like you think that you're defined by your sangha completely, and that there's kind of like a separation between the actual vani of your guru, or the teachings and the words of your guru, and then the sangha, because we are humans and we socialize and form groups in a certain way that comes from our embodiment a lot of the time. So it's always a mixed bag. And some people get into this church or sangha consciousness where like just having status in that sangha is like the highest thing, and you mix that up with the actual spirituality. So like that's one center. Like anyway, my point here is that it's very useful to like try to think of these different centers that we might place ourselves for that we're not even aware of. And as a very sad example of that, I'd like to tell a short story of my grandfather, who basically had a false center, and he figured it out, realized it at the end of his life. He was a pretty well-known classical concert pianist in Finland. And he was wounded in the war, and he was taken to like a hospital in the Alps in Switzerland. And so when he was recovering there, he fell in love with one of the doctors, who happened to be my grandmother, a Swiss doctor from this aristocratic family. And so they fell in love, and it was like straight from some Harlequin novel, like just ridiculous, like romance, you know. But then they moved back to Finland after a couple of years. And my grandfather was a highly, highly ambitious person. He wanted to be somebody. Like it was so important for him to have that status of being an accomplished person. And so he tried to be a concert pianist, but he was for many years, but then he didn't quite cut it to the like upper echelon of the concert pianists. So he became a professor at the local university, and he started his own department of music department and everything. And he constantly pushed for being somebody, and he was extremely like aggressive as a person, or like he just filled the room with his ego wherever he went. And my grandmother was a really cool person who actually gave me my first Gita. It was Max Muller's Gita. She was like a spiritual person, So she was a doctor in Finland, but she was completely overpowered by my grandfather. And she was like the nicest person in the world, always trying to serve others and be kind and everything. And my grandfather was this aggressive, kind of like narcissist, really. And that went on for like decades and decades. And then in the end of their lives, my grandmother got demented partially, and she got sick. Her heart was malfunctioning. So she went to the hospital, and something happened to her. I think she realized she was going to die, and she just like finally like flipped out on my grandfather, and she had enough of it. And because she was a little wild as a teenager, she kind of reclaimed that. She started stealing from her like inmates in the hospital room. Like in the night, she would sneak out to their cabins and like steal stuff, cabinets. And that was something she would never, ever have done in her so-called right mind. But the most interesting thing was that she got really aggressive towards my grandfather, because she had like decades worth of resentment, because she had lived for him instead of really like getting clear on what she wants. And like his aggressiveness and narcissism had basically like pushed her down, and she got really resentful of him. And she was just like, slapping his hand off of her, her hand when he came to see her, and was just very like dismissive. And the exact opposite happened to my grandfather. He became like the nicest person in the world. And he was so kind and considerate, and had completely given up on this idea of being anybody. And was always like asking us like, how are you doing? I was like shocked when it started happening. I was like, whoa, like this is a totally different person. But he had always had that side underneath him, underneath the layers of ambition and like false values. And then he realized when it was too late that really what mattered to him the most was my grandmother. Like that was what he actually lived for. And at that point, my grandmother was just like totally like whatever, And so to me, that's a very cautionary tale of like not try to chase these ambitions and false values, because when the time comes when all that's going to be taken away, it means nothing at that point anymore. So it's better to try to focus on the things that really matter to us, and then just try to build our lives intentionally around what really matters for us. And that's all I wanted to say today. Then there's a couple of comments. Oh, very nice comment. Well, Rajhari first says, negative and positive impetus. That must have been connected to a point I was making. I can't remember when this came in. Maybe Rajhari can comment more if he wants to. And then Sarda Sen comments a very nice comment. She says, I will regret if I don't say dandavats for these points, which are very valuable. Thank you, Gurunistha Prabhu. Thank you, Sarda Sen. That's really nice of you. And then Pundarik Das says, by Stephen Covey. Yeah, that's him. Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And yeah, that book's really, really amazing. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't pertain to devotees, and you can just like try to take the essence of it and apply it to devotional life. But the cool thing about the book is that a lot of it is based on these basic dharmic ideas. And so because we are devotees who live in the world mostly, we're not all renunciates, we can actually we can apply these same principles to having a sattvic dharmic life on top of being devotees. It's amazing how you can scale these same principles. They're just universal. And they work, my experience has been, they work anywhere from the bottom to the top. And yeah, highly recommended. So yeah, that was that. And if anybody has any comments or questions, let's hear them. Oh, especially if anybody has like near-death experiences that have brought some huge insights, that I'd be very interested to hear. And Martin says, thank you very much for these classes, Gurunistha Prabhu. Thank you, Martin. Thanks for being here. Oh, is Sakirati? No. Huh.
How do you want to feature?
I see Bindumati Saki has unmuted herself. I wonder if, do you have a comment? I can't hear you right now. Hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
I agree with you.
First of all, I
Pizza.
would like to ask you what you would do different in your life if you know that you're gonna die next year.
That's a very, very good question. Let's see. Have I unpinned my? Oh yeah, I'm gonna remove the pin so everybody will see Sean Sakirati here. Yeah, that's a really good question. I thought about this morning because I figured somebody might ask me this. And I have to say, I have such a like an amazing situation right now. I don't think I would change anything. I mean, I live with my guru. I live downstairs from my guru. I have a really, really good relationship with my wife, who's a very serious devotee, and I do service all day. So I really there's some regrets I have about how I've treated certain people in the past, and I have thought about. Because I meditate on this thing like, okay, I have like 1 year left, I have 6 months left or something like that. And I think about them. That's the first thing that comes to my mind, is like these certain regrets about not treating certain people well. So I would say like, that's what I would do. And I should actually do this now that I had to publicly admit it. So I should just write them right away and be like, sorry about that, I was a jerk. So yeah, that's what I would say. I have no big regrets in that way. I'm extremely happy with my own life right now. But thank you for the question. Anything else?
Yes. One thing is that my mom, she also works in a hospice since many years. So I'm gonna ask her if she thought, because she tells me many stories when what is happening, this and that, but she actually never told me like if they have regrets or something. So I will ask her that.
Yeah, that's perfect. If you could ask like within this week, and then you can share it with us next week, if possible. Yeah. Oh, that's a great idea. Fantastic. Excellent.
And also, I had 3 times near to death experiences.
Wow.
And it's very strange, but I never kind of thought about the past, what happened in my life. I more thought like where I want to be right now. So yeah, so it's not very helpful, but yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's like the near-death experiences happen so fast that there's no time to think. Like I fell from a horse on asphalt, my head first in Costa Rica, and there's no time to think like, let's see, I have a fraction of a second, like what should I have done differently? You know, it doesn't work like that.
No, it was more like, oh, I want to be home, you know. That was my strongest feeling. Like I don't want to die here. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we have Radha Madhavadasi. She has her hand up here. Go ahead, Radha Madhav, if you hear me.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
¿Sí se puede traducir de español a inglés?
Okay.
Sí, pues digamos que respecto a lo de la experiencia de muerte y como la reflexión de ese experimento mental, a mí me queda como especialmente este último año.
Yeah.
Porque, bueno, uno, pues realmente uno no sabía que se estaba enfrentando, que era esto de la pandemia. Y, por ejemplo, en mi país es un país muy desigual y hay mucha pobreza y condiciones muy, muy tristes materialmente. Y digo tristes porque en serio, a mí personalmente, pues que no soy tan elevada, pues me da muy duro como ver a la gente pasar hambre, morir de hambre, a los animales, etcétera. Y pues si bien es cierto que a nosotros nos enseñan como a no tener como esa sensación o ese dolor por lo que pasa en el mundo, pues en algún aspecto es la única experiencia como de la cual somos un poco más conscientes, ¿no? Lo otro es como una experiencia que queremos adquirir. Y entonces recuerdo como mucho lo que aprendí en la universidad, por ejemplo, que Heidegger decía que uno tenía la experiencia de muerte era a través de otros, ¿no? Entonces, por ejemplo, en mi caso, el ver morir personas de hambre. Y entonces, más a raíz de ver esas situaciones como de muerte por personas que sufren de hambre o animales, incluso durante la pandemia la muerte de varios tíos y mi abuelita, me hicieron pensar como mucho exactamente que como exactamente cómo quería proyectarme yo. O sea, yo realmente no sé si voy a acabar mi vida en un accidente de tráfico o en cualquier circunstancia así. Y por un tiempo como que eso me ayudó, por ejemplo, a tener un sana un poco estable, ¿no? Como despertarme todos los días temprano, cantar ya para orar. Pero me da cuenta, y pues igual como que me gustó mucho ese experimento mental, porque si uno se hace como esa pregunta, no por el miedo a morirse, sino por la necesidad a usar bien el tiempo, uno podría en algún aspecto como ser más consciente de realmente qué quiere ser uno y dejar de postergar lo realmente importante. Porque igual con el tiempo a mí me pasa que uno ya empieza otra vez a sentir que la muerte no está respirando cerca de uno. Bueno, la muerte como desaparecer en este cuerpo, porque y quizá todo vuelve a cambiar. Entonces me parece que es muy importante y quizás sería una buena pregunta para hacerse uno por lo menos cada 3 días, ¿no? Yo siento que eso ayudaría a mejorar sadhana, pero también siento que con una restricción y no es como tampoco entregarse a la oración, sí, o a la meditación por temor a la muerte, sino también pensando como en algo más grande. Sí, solo pues eso como que es importante tampoco que por miedo uno termine operando, porque entonces no sería sincero, como eso, y que es bueno como hacer también ese límite. Hare Krishna, muchas gracias.
Joy. Yeah, that was a wonderful comment. I wish my Spanish wasn't so rusty. I could talk with her directly because there's a lot of good stuff there. So the video, the recording, because it came from the translation, none of that's going to be here. I could try to quickly recap what Radha Madhava Didi said. She was saying at first that she feels compassion for all these people who suffer, especially in her country, from the COVID and everything that comes with that. And that she has lost some of her close relatives recently. I'm not sure if to COVID or otherwise, but she's lost them, and that made her get more serious about her sadhana. And she was saying that it'd be a good kind of like exercise for devotees to focus on the fact that we, like think about death, even daily or every couple of days or something. And I definitely agree with that. Like the Buddhists actually do that. They have this constant meditation on the impermanence and the death of particularly their own body. I mean, they take it to the whole next level. They think about how their own body is going to decompose and all these worms come and eat you up and stuff. I wouldn't go that far necessarily, but well, I don't know if it works for you, but it seems a little gory, I guess. But yeah, very much appreciate the point. And then I did want to mention, you said, Radha Madhav, you were kind of like in some ways saying that you're not sure if it's good that you feel compassion. Maybe I misread that, but if that's what you said, I think it's beautiful that you have a soft heart like that. And it's true that that might be a little bit in the circle of concern in the way that you can't do anything. But if you try to harness that compassion to a devotional context, then it's a very beautiful thing. And I mean, there's obviously nothing wrong about feeling compassion. That's beautiful in itself. As long as it doesn't take you away from the path of bhakti, which can happen if your compassion is misapplied. But if it's not problematic like that, then I think it's a beautiful thing in itself. There's a couple of long comments in the chat section in Spanish. Brajhari's comment I actually put in the Google Translate and let's see how well that went. Oh, it turned it into, let's see here. Oh, maybe it's better, Kali Yuga Bhavana, that you translate it, because Google Translate is pig Latin. Mm. Jai. Oh, no worries at all. No, it's going great. It's going great. No problem at all. I quickly wanted to just say Rajhari's comment for the people who didn't hear the translation for the recording. He was saying that Srila Suparari Maharaj mentions negative impetus and positive impetus, and thinking about death and these like suffering and stuff. That's really the idea behind the negative impetus. And basically, it's like Mayadev's service is the negative impetus to like try to push us towards bhakti. And that's a very nice point, of course. And death really does work in that way. Like Socrates said, that death is possibly the greatest of human blessings. And I think he meant exactly what Rajhari is saying there, that it's a blessing because it forces us to really focus on our actual values and what's like important in life. And then Bindumati Saki had a very, very nice comment here in the chat section. She was saying how her mother died, and that really made her understand how she she will live for the right thing, and that inspired her to live for the right thing. And let's see here. Yeah, that was the main point. I really want to thank Bindumati Saki for a nice comment. It made my day just for you to say that you feel like this is good sadhu sangha. That means a lot to me. And then Martin said he had to leave. Yeah, so that's that. And if any, it's actually 9:45 already. I mean, not there, but it's like 1 hour and 15 minutes in. So I think we better stop here. And if anybody has any questions or comments, let's save them for the next session. And thanks so much for being with us, being with me, and we'll return next week. Jai. Shri Gurudev ki jai, Shri Vaishnava Sangha ki jai. Gaur Premanande. Hari Bol.
Gurunistha Prabhu ki jai.
Jai.